It took 17 days, featured over 100 events with nearly 3,000 athletes and a medal tally of 300. The 2018 Winter Olympic Games in PyeongChang in the Republic of Korea are now officially over. What were the highlights? What were the controversies? What is the legacy? Welcome to this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. Now, there were no shortages of highlights on the snow and ice. Norway dominated the medal account, and yet many may well consider the biggest winner overall was the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Meanwhile, after the Olympic flame slowly went out in PyeongChang, the winter sports world is now directing its attention towards Beijing in 2022, as Beijing will host the next Winter Games. So what kind of legacy has PyeongChang left for Beijing? I'm pleased to be joined from the ROK by Jicheng, Deputy Director of the Media and Communications Department of the Beijing Organizing Committee for the 2022 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. From Sydney, Australia, by Tracey Holmes, a senior journalist, and here in the Beijing studio by Jiang Mengxi, a CGTN sports reporter. The warmest welcome to all of you. Let me go to Jicheng first. The 2018 Winter Olympic Games are now over. Having stayed over 2 weeks in PyeongChang, what has impressed you the most about the Games?
Hi, Liu Xin. Hi, everyone over there. Actually, I've been staying here for 2 months because as the member of the Beijing Organizing Committee, we work here as the second D because according to the IOC's Olympic Knowledge Management, we should work here as a member of the PYEONGCHANG team, and so we can observing and learning personally. And from the very first feelings and here. The most impressed my first summer game was here in Seoul 30 years ago, and now it is my first Winter Olympic Games here. So the change is great. Change is huge. When I was here 6 years ago for the first summer game here, and everybody wants to be perfect in Korea. And now this time we have the Olympic Games in a little town with only 43,000 populations here. So that is shows the change. So that's why the President Bach of the IOC said this game shows the new horizon of the Olympic game. But finally, it's only the first half of the Olympic game, and the second half will be the Paralympic game, which will start on the 9th of March.
Of course, CGTN will continue to pay attention to that. Tracey, you have been to so many Olympic Games. Do you remember how many you've been? From your observation, what were the most exciting part of the PyeongChang Games?
Look, people always ask me that, how many I've been to. I've covered 12 Olympic Games, both summer and winter. And to be able to make a comparison between each consecutive Olympic Games is almost impossible, because the beauty of the Olympic Games is that they each bring their own flavour. So this most recent Games in PyeongChang, you really got the sense of Korea and the Korean people. You really got the sense of this area of PyeongChang. It's a mountain area, it's quite rural. As Mr. Chung says, there's only 43,000 population in total. So to think that they hosted an Olympic Games for the entire world to come to and to have beamed around the globe is really quite a phenomenal achievement for such a small population. But of course, like with any Olympic Games, there are so many highs and lows, so many people who were devastated because they didn't achieve their dreams, but also so many success stories. And as President Bach said in one of his closing press conferences, some of those success stories are real surprises, the unexpected, the names you hadn't heard of, the people that jump into Olympic history without any sense that that was what they were going to do in the lead up. So, you know, all of these stories are wrapped into what is the Olympic model, and it's still yet to be surpassed by any other thing the globe knows.
From looking at the final medal tally, Norway topping the ranking, China ranking in 1 gold, 6 silver and 2 bronze, ranking 16. and many countries in between. Are you surprised in any way by the outcome?
Are you talking to me, Lucy?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Look, I'm actually not, and a lot of people I know inside China may be a little disappointed, probably expected more, because the expectation in the past has been to continue to grow. But China's been going through a real a shift, and this happens to a lot of very dominant Olympic nations. They have this golden era, and then it's an era of change, and a lot of the older, more experienced team members make their way out and younger ones come through, and during that period of change it's difficult to impress upon everybody the success that they are looking for, because the success actually comes in the preparation and in getting the experience. Now, there were some fairly young people competing here in PyeongChang for Team China, in their 20s, but doing really well. Like we've seen Gao Tinyu, the first male to win a speed skating medal for China. We saw Wu Jicheng, the first male skater from China to win a short track gold medal and set 2 world records on the way. We saw the figure skaters. We saw the first snowboard medal for China. So there are many success stories within it. It's not the great success story that everybody was hoping for, but it's a rebuilding phase, and I actually think it augurs well for China in 4 years' time.
Mengxi, you, I understand this was the very first time that you cover an Olympic Games. What impressed you the most during your time there?
Yeah, you're right. This is my first time covering the Winter Games, and I think for me, the most impressive part is definitely, you know, the atmosphere in the at the sports scene, and we have the. I have watched the short track speed skating many games in the Gangneung Ice Arena. The atmosphere there is really good. Unlike some, you know, domestic tournaments, the Olympic Games is actually a sports gala for people from around the world, you know. So in Gangneung Ice Arena, when China or South Korea, they compete against each other, and there are also some skaters from other countries. They just fight against each other for the top prize, you know. And there's some live commentator, you know, try to create a really good atmosphere in the arena, and for basically for everybody to enjoy the sports gala, you know. It's actually a world sports showpiece for everybody, I think.
Right, it's quite different watching it there on site and watching it on your phone or in front of the TV in your salon. Jicheng, now the political issue between the ROK and the DPRK was one of the main stories for us who are in the international media circle. Do you feel the Games have been overshadowed in any way by politics?
Not at all, not at all. You see, when the Games start, when the the competition start, is all the political issues and be put on side. Because I covered 12 Olympic Games and so far, and since the first time the two sides of the Koreas is marched into the Olympic arenas and the flag of the peninsulas, and each time before the opening ceremony, this is one of the so-called main stories. But actually, sports and athletes always be, they are always in the center of the stage. Just like Mr. Jiang just mentioned, that is the big sports gala of culture, sports, and the exchange and of the world. So on the other side, Olympic Games is also a big stage. So for my work as an organizer of the Olympic Games, I emphasize and concentrated on how to build the Olympic game as a big stage. So since it's a big stage and the spotlight, and it attracts all the interesting groups in the world and want to put their ideas and put their thinkings on the stage. But Olympic always is the sports gala for athletes, for the young people in the world.
Tracey, some people have said that there was a bit too much politics in the PyeongChang Games and that the DPRK effectively kidnapped the Olympics, or some people were accusing them of trying to do that. Do you see it that way?
Well, we know there was a lot of talk about the political discussion going on around the involvement of the DPRK and that marching in of the joint team that's been referred to there. If I can just probably paint the picture through the eyes of Thomas Bach, the IOC president, and I think this is a story that got lost in the middle. We know that Thomas Bach and the entire IOC movement don't like politics to interfere with sport, or with the Olympics at least. But I think this story is bigger than the politics. I think we're attributing it to politics when in fact it's a story of humanity. And it's a story of a nation that became divided and about the coming back together of the same people. As Sarah Murray, the coach of the combined women's ice hockey team, said, you know, she was reluctant that this team was going to be forced to play together. She didn't know how it was going to work. By the end of it, she said it had been life-changing for every single person on that team, including herself. And she said she realised then, these are the same people. They speak the same language. They eat the same food. They are the same people. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about humanity. Thomas Bach himself mentioned that when he was competing as a fencer, and he won a gold medal in the team event back in 1972, he was competing as a divided Germany. He knows what that feels like. When the DPRK and the ROC marched together for the very first time in the Olympic arena was in Sydney 2000 at the Summer Olympic Games. He was on the negotiating committee back then to try and get that to happen. So he knows how significant this is. He doesn't want the IOC to be politicised, but as I say, I think this is bigger than politics even. This is humanity.
I know you are not really a political journalist, but from what you said, I can't help following up and asking you, do you see these games might lead to some kind of improved relation or a window of opportunity for the tension on the peninsula to be resolved, or at least, you know, worked out a little bit to the right direction?
Well, actually, here in Australia, I do report politics. I report both domestic and international news and current affairs, so that's okay. And I mean, the sheer fact that these people have come together, the fact that people are already talking, the fact that the president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, is already having negotiations about further developments is a very positive sign. And it's a sign that's taken a long time to get to this point. And if a sporting event, an international sporting event like the Olympic Games, can foster that sort of communication, then that has to be a good thing. Now, who knows what's going to happen from now on? But already there have been discussions today, and the talk is that the DPRK is now going to send a team to the Paralympic Games. Those negotiations have happened this very day, and I know that the DPRK has also said they are willing now to sit down and speak with the US. That in itself is another huge development. So, you know, above everything, you have to have hope.
Right. And Jiang, Mengxi, your observations about the atmosphere during these games, did you feel that the politics were getting in any way in a way of a sport event?
Yeah, I think for these games here in PyeongChang, obviously I think there are always some, you know, political things that will, you know, draw us attention, you know, apart from the sport things, you know. But I think the sports, you know, for me, I'm a big fan of sports. I watch a lot of, you know, football, basketball, and also some short track, you know. At these games, I really enjoy watching, you know, being part of it. Of course, after the games, I will be a reporter. I will stand by at the press conference. I will stand maybe with Tracey or Greg, you know. We're trying to direct somebody there for a one-on-one interview. We want to show the nature of sports. You know, we want to show what is real sports to the rest of the world. Well, politics, I think, at these games, since, you know, DPRK and South Korea, they marched together in the opening ceremony. That was one of the most important factors, you know, for the opening ceremony. That why the opening ceremony is everybody is watching it, you know. But I think apart from that, and even apart from, the Russian athletes, they didn't, compete under their own flags. I think, but the spirit they showed on the sports, sports arena, I think is pretty good. I think for all the people we were there to enjoy sports. We weren't there to talk about politics, even though some politics, we have to care,
Sure. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this. Stay with us. Much more coming up. Welcome back, and I want to ask the following question to Jicheng, who is from the organizing committee of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Now, there was a little bit of, or quite a bit of controversy over the consistency of the judges' ruling. Some people in the Chinese public think that the judges have not been fair and have disqualified disproportionately more Chinese athletes than the athletes from the host country. Mr. Xu, how do you think of this controversy from what you have seen over there?
Well, the mistake of the judge is a part of the game and for all time. So I think this time the short track speed skating they got some new regulations and changes in the rules. So everything got its two sides. So yes, there was China and Canada, and got the most so-called, and the fans so-called, and misjudged, and 9 times for each. And especially they lost their gold medals and silver medals by those kind of judgment. And so I think any new rules need time to be improved. So in Beijing Olympic Games, I hope all the mistakes and all the wrong judged here and can improve. And that will be a good lesson for all the athletes in the world.
But what kind of lesson, Mr. Xu, do you think the Chinese team, for whether or not they have done the right thing, what kind of lesson do you think they have to take away from these controversies?
First, they will have a deep study and a review of all the mistakes they made this time. And secondly, I think they will got a lot of trainings and make the judgment in trainings, and especially and got the exchange with the international committee who make these judges. And thirdly, I think all the skaters are very young, and China got the young skaters on the ice, and so they have time and they have the potential for them to make the judgment and then make their improvement according to the new change of all the rules.
Right. Tracey, you have covered so many sports events. I'm going to ask you this impossible question. Who is in the wrong here? The Chinese athletes, the Chinese coaching team who probably do not know the rule book so well, or the judges who might have really been not consistent?
I don't think anybody was in the wrong, and I think it's almost impossible for judges these days to have any bias that is not picked up very, very quickly. We should point out that the South Koreans did have a number of disqualifications themselves, so it wasn't as though everything was going in their favour. I think you also have to take into account that the sport of short track speed skating is an incredibly intense one. It is incredibly aggressive. The athletes are taught to be aggressive. Now, when that aggression interferes with the other opponents, there is a penalty. I also know that the coaching staff inside the Chinese team are very experienced, some of the best in the world. We know that South Korea and China are possibly the two best nations when it comes to short track speed skating. So it's not as if they didn't know the rules, they knew the rules, but these things happen. It's a subjective sport, the same way as figure skating can be, and in the minds of the public, it's the public actually, and us commentators in the media that don't know the rules so well. The judges know them very well. It's always an international panel. That panel is changed, so it's not always the same people from race to race. And there are Chinese people who are involved in that panel, there are South Koreans, there are people from all over the world, and they do their very best. So in the wash-up, obviously the Chinese coaching staff are going to go back and have a look at the tapes and review everything that happened, as will the athletes, as will the judges from the International Skating Union. And I know for a fact that the president of the ISU has made his way to Beijing today, Jiang, and he's got lots of meetings, and he'll be sitting down with the various officials inside China and discussing those sorts of things so that everybody is working on the same page when it comes to Beijing 2022.
Right. Jiang, from a Chinese male sports enthusiast perspective, were you also confused or angry? But how did you cope with the result and accepted it, I guess, by now?
I think for the results on the short track, we have to take it, you know. But I think the officials' decisions sometimes should have been clarified more. But I think is, on the other hand, we can take a look at our own selves. And like in Torino, and like in Vancouver, and like in Sochi, the last Winter Games, China has never been done like this in short track. This event has been, China has been one of the dominant force on this event. But this, at these games in PyeongChang, we only had one gold medal from Wu Dajing, even though he won in great fashion, broke the world records twice, you know, on his way to claim the only gold medal for China in PyeongChang. But I think, you know, China short track speed skating team, you know, we have ever talked to the Li Yan, the short track speed skating coach, and according to her, the team is now in a transitional period. So we have to accept the current condition of the whole team, and so that we can work more and improve more for the next 4 years, which will be held in Beijing 2022.
Right, exactly. The curtain has fallen on the PyeongChang Winter Games. Of course, the Paralympics are still to happen, but we've seen the 8-minute performance at the closing ceremony. So, Mr. Xu, looking ahead, what kind of tips do you think you have picked up from the games in PyeongChang, and what is going to be done to help ensure that the Beijing Winter Games will be a successful one?
Yeah, as a member of the organizing committee for the Beijing 2022, see a lot of things to learn. Usually we judge a game a success or not is by 5 factors. The first, the host city or host country should build up the world-class and world-level arenas and venues. And the second is the outstanding performance by the athletes, especially by the host athletes. And the third, usually we consider is the enthusiasm of the fans, especially the local fans, and to the Olympic Games. And the fourth is the media. Yes, as Tracey just mentioned, the media played a very important role to lead the feelings and lead the comments of the public. And the media should cover and report the games from the angle of activity and fairly. And the fifth, if the game can let the lead legacies for the future is used in the country. So we concentrated mainly on the venue construction and also the fans to learn more knowledge about the winter sports and the Winter Olympic events, and thirdly, and the legacy that can benefit the youth in China in winter sports.
Okay. Tracey, we still have a couple of minutes, but I really want to know your opinion on the chances that China can stage a successful Winter Olympic Games after the 2008 Summer Olympic Games. China is, as we said, still in a transitional period of time for some events concerning winter sports. This time China ranks 16th, so it can be said that China is still relatively weak on winter sports. Do you think it's an advantage or disadvantage for Beijing 4 years down the road?
No, I think people are going to be very surprised at how successful the Chinese team will be in Beijing 2022. The top finisher on the medal table, as you mentioned previously, was Norway, a country with 5.4 million people. They won medals in 8 different sports. They have signed a deal with the authorities in China to share knowledge, to share coaching, and to come in and to bring that sort of expertise to help build the Chinese team. As we mentioned previously also, there's lots of very successful building blocks to come from PyeongChang. As we mentioned, the first ever medal for a male in speed skating, the first ever male gold medal in short track, the first ever medal in snowboard for the Chinese team. These are all building blocks. We know there are young ones coming through, and we know that in the 4 years between now and the next Winter Olympics, there's 3, if not 4 seasons of World Championships, World Cup events. And if the athletes are travelling on that international scale and getting that sort of experience, that is what is going to make the difference in 4 years' time.
What is the one biggest challenge? In 30 seconds, please, Tracey.
The one biggest challenge is always the same challenge. Doesn't matter what anyone says, it's keeping the media happy, because it's the media that's selling those messages and telling the stories around the world. If the media is happy, the world is going to get a wonderful picture of Beijing 2022, as they did in Beijing 2008.
So communication is absolutely important. Jicheng, you have a very important job there. But we're going to wrap it up.
The media first.
Right, right. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to my 3 guests. Tracey Holmes is senior journalist based in Sydney, Australia. Jicheng from the 2022 Beijing Organizing Committee for the Winter Olympic Games, and Jiang Mengxi, a sports reporter from CGTN. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook using the handle The Point with Alex, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.